Good morning, everyone. This is Uche, Sneaker Principal, and it is Friday. I'm here in my office. We're finishing up programming, so some of my staff will be here in a little bit, and it's exciting because usually programming a school. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about creating the teacher schedules, the classroom schedules, making sure we're pairing the right teachers with the right grade, you know, aligning common planning time so teachers have time to meet, to plan with each other, and also ensuring that there's equity of electives and things of that nature for our students. This takes a lot of time, and usually in most instances it could take weeks. In some cases, the whole entire summer as you're hiring and looking at student numbers. But for whatever reason, this is the first time I can think of in my career where I can say those numbers are pretty stable and the actual programming process has been very good. So today it looks like we'll have our first draft fully completed, so we can review and possibly create a second draft, to anticipate potential growth as far as our enrollment is concerned. But that's always a great thing. As we're planning and pairing teachers with classrooms and trying to make sure that we have the right fit as far as veteran teachers with the older kids or younger teachers, where do they fit in the best space on the schedule so we can provide them with the best support. um, and as we're doing this, one of the things that always comes up is, wow, this teacher is brand new, or this teacher is still working out their classroom management skills. And it's funny because it makes me think back to when I first became a teacher, and those of you who know my story, you know that my literally my at the end of my interview to become a first year special education teacher, I was told that you are going to be my dean as well. And so I had a very unique situation of being a first year teacher, but also walking into a high school as the person who would be the manager, the director, the point person for managing and supporting with student behavior. So I've always had a space in my mind where I'm always thinking about how to best, you know, pair up the right people in the right classrooms and also provide the best supports. Um, but one thing that I think we don't spend enough time thinking about is how do we truly prepare teachers to walk into classrooms and handle, you know, the potential behavioral issues that might come up. Um, and what and don't get me wrong, I always believe that your mindset walking into a classroom space is the greatest determining factor on the level of issues you're going to have in your classroom. There will always be issues, and the reason there will always be issues is because you're dealing with human beings. Yes, we want to say, the kids, the children, the students, but they're human beings. So the same level of frustrations that you encounter as a human being, they do too. The certain levels of good or bad days that you have, they have too. The only difference is that these are younger human beings who are developing the wherewithal and the skill sets to be able to handle those emotions and those experiences that they're going through. Um, I I can tell you many stories of me as a teacher, as a dean, as an assistant principal, even as a principal, where I engage with a student and around their behavior. And as I walked away from that engagement, I realized, whoa, this is not just a child acting up. This is a human being having a real human experience. Um, one such story, a number of years back, I was a assistant principal at a middle school, and a young lady who um, was having an issue in the classroom with a teacher. Nothing out of the ordinary, but it was being disruptive. So I was called there to remove the child of the classroom. So I asked her to come with me. She did. As most kids would do when the principal, assistant principal shows up. We got in the hallway, And one of my practices has always been, kind of doing triage. When I pull the kid out of the classroom, I try to kind of understand what's happening. If I'm able to redirect, refocus, then put the kid back in the classroom, I'm minimizing the child losing out on instruction, right? And in this instance, the child um, was not having it. And often what happens is when that's not working, um, myself, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people would then try to impose authority, and that's where we're like, okay, listen, now this is going to happen. You go to the office, you're going to call your parents and blah, 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 blah. You're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do this, and then we're going to get you back in class. So you go from trying to investigate and negotiate to not being pretty much a dictator. This is what's going to happen. And I received from this child, something I've gotten many, many times before. And any of you guys who were experienced as deans or administrators, that whole, you're not my father, you're not my daddy, you know. And, and in that moment, I was like, okay, I'm not trying to be your father, but you're gonna follow instructions. You're gonna do X, Y, Z. And this child went from 0 to 1,000, which I didn't even understand because, again, I think the reason she was being moved out of class, she was being talkative, and then she engaged with another student, and it turned into an argument. Was dropped in the classroom. The other student self-regulated, but she didn't. So I was like, this is not even that serious. So of course, um, I did what I do, or at least what I did at that time, you know, call the parents. Parents have to come in. I was indignant, like how their child is behaving in this manner. Then what? This is what happened next. The guidance counselor came to me and says, "Hey, I heard there was a situation with this particular student. Let me give you a backstory." And the backstory was this: the student has issues with authority, especially when it's male authority. And the reason for this, and the and it was funny because this student actually gave me the key to the reason for her issue with authority, especially mental authority. She said to me, "You're not my father." And of course, in that moment in time, there's no in the world for me to be able to truly decipher what was meant by that, because I've heard that many times before. If I had a nickel for every time I was told by a student, "You're not my daddy," I'll probably be a thousandaire, right? Um, what the guy also explained to me that the two most important people in her life, the two people she cherishes the most in her life, her father and older brother, were incarcerated. And because of that, any male who tries to enter her space, authoritative figure, because her brother and her father were two people that she listened to, she followed their instructions, and and she never wavered, when it came to them. So here I am trying to impose my authority, and for her, it's a threat to the authority of her brother and father, who were both incarcerated. And it was interesting because when I heard that, I was like, "Oh snap! That's very interesting. That's a piece of information I wish I would have had before I went into that conversation, because I probably would have handled it differently. Because this was not just a child acting up. There was a child who was going through a very real human experience, the trauma of losing brother and dad, or dad and brother, and now being in a world where the two most important male figures in her life are not there at the moment, and here's this male authority figure trying to impose the same level of authority that brother and dad, or dad and brother, had in her life, and it's almost like you're trying to intrude in that space, that space that is held for her family, for her family members. And I have to admit that forced me, excuse me, to approach situations with students very differently. You know, Beyond just trying to get to know their names and what classes they're in and their personalities when playing around, I learned to start to dig deeper. Not being intrusive, but get to know my students, get to know their background stories, whatever information I can get from guidance counselors, from teachers. I tried to build that up because it helped me figure out how best to approach a situation. And there's some situations that are just going to be baseline. Is how you approach, but there's other situations where you have to be a lot more thoughtful and making sure you're not just being a bull in a china shop. Thinking by being a dictator, being intimidating, that you'll get your way. You know, remember this: the students in your classroom are human beings. And I'll even say this: I don't care how old they are, whether they're pre-K or they're in the 12th grade. They're still human beings. They still have emotions, be loved, be missed. They get sad, they get scared, and we have to make sure that we are approaching them holistically. And what I mean by holistically, that we understand as much as possible who they are, um, and how best to handle them in situations. We talk about love languages. We got to figure out what the love languages of our students are, so that we can best serve them. Um, but yeah, it's just something I thought about as we were programming yesterday, and we're talking about putting kids in what classroom, what teachers should teach what, and what teacher personality types and abilities would work well in what spaces. And I thought to myself, beyond that, which is very necessary, we also need to spend time having this kind of conversation with our teachers, and helping them to understand why it's important to really build and those relationships and really get a deeper understanding of who they're serving. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to get back to work. I got to write up some job descriptions for this upcoming school year, and I can make sure that everybody knows what the expectations are and how they will be supervised and also supported, and of course rated, so that we can make sure they're on the right track. This is Uche. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to y'all soon. All right. Be well.